Salut, bonjour, bonsoir. I'm Cassie, your native French tutor, so you can learn French the French way. Did you know that French is spoken by over 300 million people around the world? So it's not just a language that sounds fancy or romantic, though, well, it does. But it's also a language of culture, of history, business, everything. And today I will give you 5 reasons why it is the language that you should learn. So if you're on this channel, I guess you already have a certain interest for the language. That's for sure. But I will make sure that if you did not take it seriously before, from today on, you will. Donc on commence. So as I was telling you, French is spoken by more than 300 million people in the world. 300 millions de gens. And I know we started learning numbers together, so I will put like the link somewhere, quelque part. Don't know where, but that will be there. Donc l'OIF, Organisation Internationale de la Francophonie. They include 88 member states and governments. So that makes French the second most widely learned language in the world after English and the 5th most spoken. That's after Mandarin, English, Spanish and Arabic. Et il y a bien plus. It's also an official language for international organizations such as the United Nations, NATO, the European Union, the Olympic committees, etc. So knowing French will help you to communicate with people all around the world, really. That will give you great opportunity for traveling, working, and just cultural exchange. So if you're watching this video, I bet that you speak English, whereas you're a native speaker or not, maybe it's your second language, I don't know. I still have great news for you. J'ai une très bonne nouvelle. French is one of the easiest languages to learn.
C'est devenu presque trop facile. Presque.
It is a Romance language, just like Italian or Spanish, just to give you a few. And they are one of the easiest languages to learn for English speakers. It sounds weird when I compare French to Italian or Spanish, and I understand. Je comprends tout à fait. That's because of pronunciation. Because French pronunciation comes from Germanic influences. So, for example, that's why we have that R, and not that R. Once you get familiar with pronunciation, and I'm here to help you, of course, it's just okay. It is so much easier. And if you don't know where to start, I just created a video about the alphabet a few weeks ago, so I will put it là, quelque part. Now, when it comes to the relationship between the French language and English language, well, mostly because of the relationship between the UK and France, because of centuries interfering with each other and the Normand, well, kind of French invasions in the UK, part of the English vocabulary is actually French, or at least coming from French. There is a website, semalingue.com. They say that it's like 45% of English language that comes from French. I think it's a bit too much, maybe it's a bit exaggerated, but hey, qui sait. Though I would say for sure 30%. You're not starting from scratch, and that makes it so much easier and more comfortable. But now, if English is your second language, maybe you speak a Romance language as well, that's super easy because grammar structures basically are the same. And if your mother tongue is Portuguese, I have great news for you because you already know how to pronounce nasal vowels like on, un. We pretty much have the same. And I have very successful Portuguese-speaking students. But I have to be honest, the ones that nail the pronunciation are Germans. Because, well, French pronunciation is Germanic. So that R, for example, that's a done deal for you. Okay, we always make a lot of fun of French people because they don't speak another language. But did you know that most French people, they can travel the world without ever speaking another language? That's because France, really the country, has territories almost all around the world. Well, pretty much all around the world, just not in Asia. So these territories mostly are islands like Tahiti, but I'm also thinking about Guadeloupe or Martinique in the Caribbean, Saint-Pierre-et-Miquelon next to Canada, La Nouvelle-Calédonie next to Australia, etc., etc. La Réunion in the Indian Ocean, like really everywhere. If you cross the borders of France, really France as a country, there are plenty of other countries that speak French. 29 countries in the world have French as one of their official languages. I'm thinking about Canada here. There are also several countries in West Africa, such as the Ivory Coast or Senegal. And there are even more countries, they don't have French as one of their official languages, but they still use it for administration purposes, for example. And here I'm thinking about Lebanon. Dans d'autres pays, even though it's not official, French is still widely used. I'm thinking here about Morocco, for example. So it's not an official language, but you can go there by speaking French and you will find somebody who will understand. And there are certain parts of the world where people don't really speak French anymore, though they used to, but still France had a huge impact on the local culture. And here I'm thinking about Louisiana in the US or countries in Southeastern Asia, such as Vietnam or Cambodia. For example, in Australia, I was going to Vietnamese bakeries because the bread was so good. In French bakeries, I remember, man, the bread was so expensive for what it was. But in Vietnamese bakeries, it was amazing. And that's where I discovered the sandwich banh mi. Sorry for the pronunciation. The banh mi, and it's made with une baguette et du pâté and other ingredients, of course, that makes it so good. You can travel the world just speaking French, and that will allow you to communicate with people and understand their history. So sometimes the history can be quite painful because it's due to colonization, but it's still extremely important to acknowledge it. So now, as we discussed already, French is a language of diplomacy, like really everywhere. That's not all there is. France, as a country, is the 6th largest economy in the world. And we're fighting with the UK for the 5th spot like every year. So, you know, between. We're part of leaders in certain fields like le luxe, l'hôtellerie-restauration, le tourisme, la mode, of course, la mode, fashion. So speaking French can be a valuable asset in your career. Knowing French can for you increase job prospects, and especially if you are interested in working for international companies and big groups. And just think about it, like the richest man in the world is not, what's his name again? Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, to say it with the French accent. It is Bernard Arnault, who is the big boss of the group LVMH, and I'm pretty sure you know Louis Vuitton. Well, they own Louis Vuitton, but there are other groups like Chanel, L'Oréal. They are part of the richest people in the world. French luxury is insanely rich. Imagine the competitive advantage it gives you to just speak the language. But I mean, if you're not into business, you're already very happy with your career, it's fine. French is still a great choice. If you're passionate about food, for example, most of food-related words come from French, or just word standards when it comes to hospitality. It comes from France. Just to give you an example, in English, the names of meats, they come from French. You have the animal, the cow, maybe the pig, but the meat is called beef because of bœuf, and it's called pork because of porc. I find it extremely cool, to be honest, to see the influence of French, but see how much you already know. Okay, and now we're reaching the 5th point. 5th, 5. Again, video about numbers, etc., etc. So speaking French will just help you to discover France. Did you know actually that France is the most visited country in the whole world, mostly thanks to Paris, but there are other gorgeous places. And if you speak French, you will discover them as well and feel welcomed. And that's the most important part, and that's all I can wish for you. So you will be amazed how far just a few words can get you. Because by just learning a few words, for example in bake, you will be able to order more than une baguette.
Je prends la vie du bon côté.
Because that breaks my heart personally when I hear people saying that in France we only have baguette because it's the only word they know when it comes to French bread. But just look at a French bakery. How diverse the bread is there. Like, I'm mouth-watering just thinking about it. But there is another point, and it's about politeness. It's about rules of living together. By just learning a few words and a few rules to French culture, you will see that it's very unlikely that French people are rude to you. And like unpopular opinion warning, je sais, in France, when I hear like friends of mine or my students having bad experiences, most of the time it's because they broke a rule of French politeness without knowing it. Like it's not their fault, they just didn't know before studying with me. Come on. But for example, one thing that is extremely important is that people working in services, such as waiters, waitress, or the cashier in supermarkets, they expect at least bonjour et merci, because they want to be treated as people, as human beings, and not as tools at your service. In France, it makes sense, and if you do not follow that rule, you will be considered extremely rude. And it happened to me as a waitress that I treated customers very poorly with the rest of my team. Like, we treated them very poorly because they were doing that, which is normal in certain cultures, but we didn't know, and they didn't know that in our culture it was just a no-go. So it led to very awkward situations. And without knowing French and a bit about French culture, you may put yourself into certain situations like that. But no worries, I got you back. So subscribe to that channel to learn more and avoid these kind of situations. But I think you guessed my point, right? French has a culture that is celebrated worldwide. It is known for its cuisine, for the art, cinema, literature, architecture, like all that. And if you want to understand its rich cultural heritage, I really advise you to learn French now. You don't need to be fluent in French when you visit France, but just have some knowledge. That would help tremendously. It will just make your experience way more enjoyable because you will be able to order in a restaurant. You can navigate the menu, you will be able to communicate with locals, ask questions, all that. So here I'm talking about France because I'm French, but what I'm telling you is true in other French-speaking countries as well. Imagine how much better your travels will be. And I have a bonus point for you. It's just that French sounds so cool. I honestly cannot remember how many times I was on the phone and somebody just looked at me without understanding what I was saying. And they just told me, oh my God, you sound so graceful. Yeah, they said that. But also you sound so cool and it sounds so nice. And actually on the phone, I was being so rude and upset. I remember talking about an ex of mine like that. And my roommate was like, oh, it sounds so beautiful. No, he was an asshole, but I was saying it. So yeah, French is basically a superpower. And I love that. Okay, so learning French is not just about mastering a language, though it is extremely good for your brain, let's be honest. But whether you're interested in culture, in business, diplomacy, arts, etc., French can be an extremely valuable asset to you. What are you waiting for now? Start learning French today. Start learning French today thanks to my other videos. If you don't know where to start, you could start with greetings, and I put the description just en bas, but you can also subscribe to my newsletter to receive 2 free lessons every month, together with exercises and updates. So À toi de jouer et je te dis à la semaine prochaine.